I had been working late night shifts for weeks, and that night I was especially exhausted. It was around 10:30 p.m., and I was finally home, sitting on the couch in my living room. The lights were dim, the soft glow from the television flickering across the walls, and I was half dozing off, letting the quiet weight of fatigue press against my eyelids. The room was still, quiet except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint whir of the air conditioner cycling on. I had just pulled a blanket over my legs, curling into a semi-comfortable position, when I heard it, the mailbox opening and shutting outside. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The sound was sharp and distinct, echoing faintly against the pavement outside my house. My heart jumped. Who would be out there this late? Almost instinctively, I froze, trying to convince myself it was probably nothing, just the wind, or maybe a branch hitting the mailbox. But the sound hadn't been weak or random. It had the definitive clank of metal opening, then closing, a clear and deliberate motion. I set the blanket aside and stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long. I glanced out the window by the front door, and for a moment, I couldn't see anything. The street was empty, quiet, lined with other homes whose porch lights were mostly off. A car was parked far down the block, but nobody was outside, and the night air seemed almost too still. Hesitantly, I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The cool night air hit my face, carrying the faint smell of damp asphalt and freshly cut grass from a neighbor's yard. I walked to the mailbox. My pulse was quickening slightly, a mixture of curiosity and that subtle, gnawing sense of unease that comes when something unexpected happens late at night. I pulled open the mailbox, and inside, there it was, my mail. Nothing unusual, just letters and a few packages that had arrived that day, but the timing felt off. It was so late, far later than anyone should have been delivering mail. My mind raced. Who would be out delivering mail at almost 11 p.m.? It didn't make sense. Curiosity and concern pushed me further. I walked out to the sidewalk, straining to see down the quiet street. That's when I saw him. The mail carrier, moving methodically down the row of houses, flashlight in hand, putting mail into each mailbox. He was dressed in the standard uniform, a jacket and cap, but what was startling wasn't the uniform. It was the fact that he was out there at all, alone in the dead of night. He moved slowly, deliberately, checking each mailbox carefully before moving on, and the streetlights cast long shadows that flickered across the pavement as he passed. I called out, half joking, half incredulous. Nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night, huh? I meant it lightheartedly, thinking about the old Postal Service motto. He didn't even look back. He simply said, "Yeah," in a flat, calm tone, and kept walking. There was no expression on his face, no acknowledgement beyond that brief, almost robotic response. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I stood there for a moment, watching him move farther down the street. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the only sounds were the soft crunch of his boots on the sidewalk and the distant hum of a few cars in the neighborhood. It struck me as surreal, almost cinematic, the way he moved in silence, so late, so deliberate. The air felt heavier than usual, cooler somehow, and I realized my pulse was still racing even though I wasn't in danger. I stepped back onto my porch, thinking through what I had just witnessed. My first instinct was to call the police or at least make a report, but then I thought better of it. The mail carrier wasn't doing anything illegal. He was just incredibly late, completely dedicated to his route. Still, it felt wrong, unnatural. No one should be walking around delivering mail at this hour, and the thought of him methodically going house to house in the dark made the hair on my arms stand up. Curiosity overtook me again. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to scan the street. He was still moving steadily, reaching the next house in line. I noticed small details I hadn't paid attention to before. The way he held the flashlight slightly angled to see the mail slot clearly, the slight wear on the heels of his boots, the careful way he checked the address numbers on each mailbox before inserting the letters. Everything about his movements was precise, meticulous. It was almost hypnotic, the way he went about his task. I decided to keep an eye on him until he left the neighborhood. My front porch gave me a good vantage point, and I could watch without being seen. He continued down the block, never looking up, never acknowledging anyone, simply focused on the task. It was unnerving, watching someone so committed, so late at night, with such mechanical precision. The rhythm of his steps, the quiet scrape of letters entering mailboxes, and the faint jingling of keys from his bag all combined to make an eerie soundtrack to the night. Eventually, he reached the end of the street and turned down another block. I waited until he disappeared from view, the shadows swallowing him completely. Only then did I step back inside my house, closing the door carefully behind me. I leaned against it for a moment, trying to calm down. The normal sounds of my living room, the faint hum of the television, the ticking of a clock on the wall, felt almost comforting after witnessing something so surreal. I went to check the mailbox again, this time more calmly. Everything was in order: letters, bills, a few small packages. Nothing unusual beyond the timing. I realized that, despite how unnerving the situation had felt, nothing dangerous had occurred. No threat, no intrusion. Just a very late mail carrier who had insisted on finishing his route no matter the hour. That night, I couldn't shake the image of him. Walking alone in the dark, methodical and silent, almost more a shadow than a person. It left a lasting impression on me, not because of fear, but because of how strange and unexpected life could be. Even ordinary routines, like delivering mail, could feel completely otherworldly when displaced into an unusual time or context. In the days following, I kept thinking about that night. I watched for the mail carrier the next morning, noticing him taking his usual route on schedule in broad daylight. It was ordinary again, normal, completely mundane. But the memory of him moving down the street at 10:30 p.m., in the stillness of the night, precise and silent, stayed with me. It reminded me that even ordinary people, performing ordinary tasks, could become sources of unexpected tension when the timing, context, and quiet of the night aligned just right. I never saw him walking that late again, but the memory lingered. It made me more aware of the subtle sounds outside my house, the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of distant traffic, and even the soft click of my own mailbox. That night was a strange lesson in patience, observation, and how easily the ordinary can become unnerving. I learned to respect the night, to notice things I normally wouldn't, and to accept that sometimes there isn't anything supernatural at work. It's just the world moving in a way you weren't expecting. I've been working as a janitor at a fairly large gym for a couple of years now. Most nights are uneventful. The place closes around 10 p.m., and my shift usually starts shortly after, giving me a couple of hours to clean the locker rooms, bathrooms, gym floors, and make sure everything is in order for the morning crowd. The gym itself isn't old, but there's one section that always felt out of place. A stairwell near the back that leads down to a door we've never been able to open. The lock on it was long gone, and the key had been misplaced years ago. It was just left there, a solid metal door at the bottom of the stairs, locked from the inside or at least jammed shut. Nobody ever went down there, and the area was usually ignored even by the staff. I didn't think much of it. It was just another part of the building, nothing unusual about that. That is, until one night, around 1:30 a.m., I was finishing up cleaning the cardio machines on the second floor. The gym was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional drip of water from a leaking faucet in the locker room. I was alone, as usual, walking back toward the stairwell to sweep the floors when I heard it. The first bang. At first, I thought maybe someone had dropped a weight or a mop bucket. But then it came again, slow and deliberate. Bang. Then another bang, exactly 1 second apart, over and over. My first instinct was to freeze. I stopped sweeping and slowly walked toward the top of the stairwell. The sound was coming from the old door at the bottom, echoing up the concrete stairwell in a way that made the vibrations almost feel like a drum against my chest. The banging continued, steady, rhythmic, like someone on the other side was deliberately trying to get attention. I stood there, staring down the stairs. The stairwell was dimly lit, with a single flickering fluorescent light overhead. Shadows stretched long and sharp across the steps. The door itself was metal, gray, dented in places, and covered in old scuffs. The sound kept coming every second for a couple of minutes. I couldn't see anyone. There was no way anyone could have gotten down there without me knowing. And when I finally summoned the courage to step closer, the banging stopped. Just like that. Silence. I waited for a few minutes, unsure what to do. Then, a few minutes later, it started again. Same rhythm, same sound. I stood at the top of the stairs, listening carefully. The banging stopped the moment I took a step down. I tried again, slowly moving toward the edge of the stairwell, and the sound stopped instantly again. My heart was pounding. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, trying to see if there was some obvious cause. Maybe a loose metal panel, a pipe, something mechanical. But the door and the stairwell were perfectly normal. Nothing moved. Nothing could have caused it. I finished my shift feeling uneasy, telling myself I must have imagined part of it or that the building was settling in some strange way. But the sound was too distinct, too loud, and too rhythmic to be random. The next morning, I told my manager about it. He was skeptical, but he agreed to have a locksmith come in to see if the door could be opened. We scheduled it for the next week. When the locksmith arrived, I watched him inspect the door carefully. He tried a few tools on the lock, which had been rusted shut for years. Finally, with a loud crack and a heavy shove, the door swung open. My stomach tightened, half from anticipation, half from the lingering fear. I expected some strange, forgotten room, maybe old supplies piled high, maybe even a leak or a hazard that could explain the noises. But what I saw was almost anticlimactic. An empty supply closet. Bare concrete walls, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a few small hooks on the walls for storage. The floor was clean, dust-free, completely empty. There was nothing to bang against. No loose panels, no debris that could fall and create that rhythmic sound. After that, I felt a mix of relief and confusion. Logically, there was no way anyone could have been down there. The stairwell was blocked, and the door had been locked and jammed for years. But a few nights later, as I was finishing my rounds again, I heard it. The same rhythmic banging, echoing up the stairwell. My stomach sank. I stood at the top, flashlight in hand, but when I stepped closer, it stopped again. I checked the closet later with the locksmith's tools still at hand, just to be thorough. Still empty.
No explanation.
Since then, it has become a regular, if unsettling, part of my nights at the gym. Every few weeks, usually around 1 to 2 a.m., the banging starts. Always rhythmic, always coming from the same locked, empty supply closet. No one is down there, and the building's security cameras don't pick up anything unusual. There are no drafts or vibrations from other machinery that could explain it. It's just the sound, clear, deliberate, echoing in the stairwell. Over time, I've noticed patterns. The banging almost always occurs when I am alone. When someone else is in the building, it doesn't happen. I've tried to stay calm, to observe carefully, and I've ruled out almost every physical explanation. The building isn't settling, there are no loose panels or pipes near that door, and it's impossible for someone to sneak in unnoticed. The metal door is thick, and the stairwell is isolated. Still, the sound happens. I've even tried standing at the top of the stairs for long periods, listening and recording with my phone, but nothing ever shows up on playback. Just the faint echo of the banging, fading before I can fully capture it. It's strange how a single sound can unsettle you so completely. The stairwell itself is narrow and concrete, and the echo makes the banging sound louder than it really is, vibrating up through your chest. The isolation, the dim light, and the knowledge that no one could possibly be down there makes it impossible to ignore. I've learned to be methodical, to check my surroundings carefully, but even then, my pulse spikes the moment it starts. I've cleaned that area hundreds of times, walked past the stairwell countless times, and still, the sound always catches me off guard. I've considered mechanical explanations, some kind of temperature-induced metal contraction, a pipe striking a loose bracket, something that could create that loud, rhythmic sound. But nothing in the construction, the layout, or the room itself could account for the timing or the consistency. The door is thick, solid metal, set into concrete, and completely empty behind it. It defies all logical reasoning. Even though it's unsettling, I've accepted it as part of my job. The gym is safe, there's no actual danger, and the closet is empty. The noise doesn't harm anyone. It's just an eerie, persistent reminder of how strange even ordinary places can be. There's a rhythm to it, almost hypnotic, like a warning, but there's no physical presence, no real threat. It's just there, a phenomenon tied to the night, the stairwell, and the locked closet. Over time, I've learned to work around it. I check the top of the stairs quickly, use my flashlight to scan the stairwell, and proceed with cleaning as usual. The noise may happen or it may not. Either way, I focus on the task at hand. It has become part of the rhythm of my night shift. I've shared it with a few trusted coworkers, but most dismiss it as a trick of acoustics or imagination. I don't try to argue. I've seen it, I've heard it, and I've verified that the closet is empty. That's enough for me. In the end, the haunted closet is just a strange quirk of the building. A sound that has no clear cause, but one that I've grown used to. I work around it, respect it, and remain vigilant, knowing that some things in an empty building at night can't be explained easily. The sound may start again tomorrow, next week, or next month, but I've learned to accept it as part of the gym's night shift reality. It's unnerving, yes, but entirely harmless. The building is sound, the closet is empty, and the banging is just a mystery I live with every time I take the stairs. I had been working night shifts as a security guard for about 6 months at a suburban neighborhood that had mostly empty streets after 11 p.m. My main job was routine: drive the perimeter, check the security cameras, respond to alarms, and make sure the neighborhood felt safe. Usually, nights were quiet. The occasional dog bark, the distant sound of tires on asphalt, or the wind moving through the trees was all that disturbed the silence. But one night changed how I looked at the job forever. It was around 2:15 a.m. when my radio crackled with a report from a neighbor who had seen a suspicious figure in their backyard. They didn't know who it was, just that someone had been climbing over the fence near the house, acting erratically and looking in windows. I was already patrolling that street, so I accelerated my SUV and parked a few houses down, keeping the headlights off. The neighborhood was silent, houses dark except for occasional night lights. The air smelled faintly of damp grass and leaves. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, moving cautiously toward the house the neighbor had called about. From the curb, I could see the house clearly. It was a 2-story suburban home with a fenced backyard. Nothing unusual except for the silhouette of a man crouched near a window. His movements were jerky and uncoordinated, but he stayed low, as if trying not to be seen. My gut tightened. I knew immediately that this was more than someone sneaking around for mischief. I called it in over the radio. Unit on scene, suspicious individual attempting entry. My voice was calm, but my hands shook slightly, gripping the flashlight tighter. I circled the house slowly, sticking to the shadows, trying to get a better view without alerting him. That's when I noticed the man had a small backpack slung over one shoulder. He was methodically moving along the side of the house, checking each window and door. It was deliberate, careful. He wasn't panicking, he was organized. My pulse quickened as I realized the potential danger. I had no idea what he was capable of, but the intensity of his focus, the way he moved with such calculation, made my stomach turn. I held my flashlight steady, keeping him in view as I waited for backup. The man suddenly froze at the side door, the kind of door that leads to the kitchen or basement, and I realized that if he got inside, he would have access to the entire house. I moved closer to see better, heart pounding in my chest. The radio crackled again, confirming that backup units were on the way, but it would still take several minutes. That stretch of time felt endless. Then he started banging on the door. Hard, deliberate bangs, one after another, as if testing it or trying to force it open. Each thud echoed sharply in the quiet street. I counted them as I watched, flashlight shaking in my grip. Every second, another bang. I could feel the vibrations in my chest through the concrete sidewalk. The sound didn't stop, and I realized that if the door gave way, he would be inside, and I would be the only one between him and the family. I crouched behind a low hedge, trying to keep my position hidden, and observed him. He wasn't wearing gloves. His hands were bare, and each impact left a faint smear of dirt on the door. It was almost hypnotic, the rhythm of the banging, and for a second, I wondered if the neighbors even knew what they were about to face. Then suddenly he stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the bangs had been. I froze, listening, trying to hear anything, the slightest movement. My flashlight cut through the darkness, scanning every angle of the yard, but he wasn't moving. I inched closer to the door, shining the beam across the window near the top. There was nothing to see. No one inside, no sign that anyone had reacted yet. Just the dark interior, silent except for my own breathing. I stepped back when I heard another faint sound. A shuffling, almost inaudible, but close. He had moved to another part of the house, closer to the back corner, crouched low again. I signaled to my radio, whispering into the mic, trying to stay calm. Unit on scene. Suspect still outside. Backup almost here. Minutes felt like hours. The man crouched there, sometimes moving slowly, sometimes freezing completely. And then he started banging again. Same rhythm, same force, each impact thudding through the door, reverberating up through the ground and into my knees. I realized how deliberate it was, almost as if he was following a plan. I couldn't make sense of it, couldn't guess his motive, only knew the situation was dangerous. The thought that he might actually get inside and harm the family was unbearable. Finally, the sound of sirens in the distance. Backup had arrived. I stayed hidden, watching as 2 units pulled up and the officers jumped out, guns drawn. The man froze immediately, his eyes wide, darting around as he realized he was surrounded. He didn't resist when they approached, hands raised. The relief that flooded me was almost physical. The threat that had seemed imminent, the pounding on the door, the tension of waiting in the dark, it all ended in a sudden, almost surreal calm. The officers took him into custody, and I watched them search his backpack. Inside were tools, gloves, and materials that could have been used for forced entry, but nothing else particularly unusual. No weapons, no threatening notes. The danger had been very real, though, and it was terrifying to think about what could have happened if we hadn't arrived when we did. The family inside had been asleep, unaware of the threat just outside their door. If the response had been delayed even a few minutes, the situation could have escalated to something much worse. The next few nights were quiet, almost unbearably normal after that. I couldn't stop thinking about the rhythm of the banging, the way it had echoed in the still street, how the man had crouched, methodical and patient, until someone arrived. I realized that the job wasn't just about watching cameras or patrolling quiet streets. It was about presence, awareness, and the ability to act under pressure. That night, every routine detail of my job mattered. Every second counted. Even now, months later, I still replay that night in my mind. The silent streets, the dim lighting, the precise rhythm of the pounding, and the moment of pure relief when backup arrived. I've learned to trust my instincts more, to be aware of the subtle signs that something is wrong, and to respect how quickly ordinary situations can turn dangerous. The incident was terrifying, yes, but it also reinforced why I do what I do. Protecting people when they can't protect themselves, and making sure that the dangers lurking in the quiet night don't reach them. In the end, the man was caught before any harm came to the family. That knowledge has stayed with me. Relief mixed with lingering unease, because I know that danger can appear quietly, in places that seem safe, and that being present, alert, and ready to respond is the difference between disaster and safety. The experience taught me how fragile normal life is, how quickly a night shift can turn from uneventful to critical, and why every precaution matters. I keep that in mind every time I start my patrol, knowing that vigilance isn't just about routine. It's about preventing tragedies before they happen. I had been working night shifts at a large manufacturing plant for over a year. Most nights were uneventful. Machines humming, conveyor belts moving, the occasional beeping of sensors, and me walking through the empty floors making sure nothing was out of place. Security cameras covered most areas, but there were still corners and storage rooms that were dark and hard to see, places that always made me uneasy. It was one of those nights when the silence really started to weigh on me. I started my shift around 10 p.m., logging in at the security office and reviewing the overnight checklist. The building was massive, multiple floors, storage areas, and maintenance rooms. I made my rounds, walking slowly through the dimly lit corridors, checking that machines were properly shut down, doors were locked, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. The hum of the overhead lights was almost constant, and the echo of my footsteps on the concrete floor made the empty hallways feel much longer than they really were. Around 1:30 a.m., I was near the maintenance area on the far side of the building when I heard a faint noise coming from one of the storage rooms. It was subtle at first, a soft scraping sound, almost like metal being dragged across the floor. I paused in the hallway, my flashlight beam cutting across the door. The building was cold, a draft coming from the ventilation system sending chills up my spine. The scraping sound came again, slow and deliberate. I knew I had to investigate. My training always said to check unusual noises immediately to make sure nothing dangerous was happening. I approached the door slowly, keeping my hand on the handle. The air felt heavier here, and the usual hum of the building seemed to fade into an oppressive silence. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and steady, keeping pace with my slow steps. I opened the door and stepped inside. The storage room was small and dimly lit by a single flickering overhead light. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes of spare parts and maintenance tools. I scanned the room with my flashlight. Nothing moved. No one was there, and everything looked in order. I crouched slightly to examine the floor, looking for anything that could have caused the noise, but the concrete was clean. Then I heard it again, a soft but distinct creaking sound coming from the corner of the room. My heart skipped a beat. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Shadows stretched across the walls, cast by the weak flicker of the overhead light. I noticed one of the boxes on a high shelf had shifted slightly, as if it had been nudged. My pulse quickened. I could feel every hair on my arms standing on end. I slowly moved closer, keeping the beam on the shelf, but nothing fell, nothing moved further. I realized then how vulnerable I was. The room was small, only one way in and out. The door I had entered through was behind me, and the corners of the room were full of obstacles that could hide someone or something. The thought that an intruder could be here, waiting, made my stomach twist. I had no backup. No one else was in the building. The noise had stopped again, leaving only the faint buzz of the lights and the distant hum of the HVAC system. I called into my radio, trying to keep my voice calm. Security check, storage room 8. No visual on any intruder. There was no response, only the static hum in the earpiece. I was alone. My instincts told me to leave immediately, but I also knew that if there really was something wrong, I had to investigate fully before moving on. I stepped deeper into the room, flashlight sweeping across the shelves and floor. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, a sterile, industrial scent that only made the room feel colder. Then I heard it again, a scraping, almost like claws or shoes dragging across the concrete floor. I froze. The sound was coming from directly behind me, somewhere near the back of the room. I turned slowly, keeping the beam on the shadows. Nothing. The boxes and shelves were still. My mind raced with possibilities. A stray animal that had somehow gotten in, a loose piece of metal falling, or someone else. The thought that it could be another person in the room with me made my hands shake. I moved toward the exit, keeping my flashlight pointed in front of me. Every step felt amplified, echoing in the small room. The scraping came again, closer this time, deliberate, almost as if it were following me. My pulse was racing, my breathing shallow. I reached the door, grasped the handle, and yanked it open, stepping out into the corridor. Relief washed over me, but it was temporary. I glanced back at the room. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and for a moment, I could swear I saw something move just inside the corner of my eye. I didn't wait to confirm it. I radioed in immediately, alerting the main office to a potential intruder in the storage room. Backup arrived within minutes, 2 officers walking with flashlights and handguns drawn. They swept the room while I stayed in the hallway, flashlight trembling in my hand. Everything in the storage room was in place except for the shifted box on the shelf. No intruder, no animal, nothing that could explain the scraping sounds I had heard. We checked the rest of the building together. Doors were locked, windows intact, cameras showed no one entering or leaving. The officers were calm but attentive, making sure nothing had been missed. Eventually, they left, assuring me it was probably nothing serious. Maybe a settling noise in the building, maybe a rat in the walls, but I knew better. The sound had been too deliberate, too timed, too precise to be random. For the rest of my shift, I stayed near the main office, flashlight in hand, watching the monitors. Every faint noise made me tense. The echo of my own footsteps down the halls was unnerving. I realized that the building, for all its security and lights, had corners and shadows that could hide danger perfectly. One wrong step, one moment of curiosity, and I could have walked right into a situation far worse than imagined. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., the sun was starting to rise. The corridors, once dark and oppressive, were bathed in pale morning light. Everything seemed calm again. The scraping sounds had stopped, the shadows no longer felt menacing, and the building felt ordinary once more. But I knew that if I hadn't stayed alert, if I had simply walked into that storage room unprepared, I could have been seriously harmed. The lesson was clear. Noises at night in isolated spaces are never harmless, and investigating them alone is dangerous. Even now, months later, I still think about that night. The scraping, the shadows, the feeling of being watched in an empty building. Those sensations are burned into my memory. I never underestimate the importance of backup, communication, or situational awareness during night shifts. The experience changed how I work entirely. Every noise, every shadow, every movement in the building now gets treated with caution. I still patrol alone sometimes, but I keep my radio close, my flashlight ready, and my mind sharp. That night taught me, in the clearest terms, that curiosity can be dangerous, and that even ordinary buildings can become life-threatening when darkness and isolation take over. It was close to midnight when it happened. I was on my usual night shift, sitting alone in a small office at the back of the property. I worked as the overnight caretaker for a private estate that had been turned into an administrative building. It was an old house, big windows, creaky floors, and surrounded by a lot of open land. My job wasn't difficult, mostly keeping an eye on the security cameras, checking doors, and doing hourly rounds. The place was quiet, too quiet most nights, and after a while you got used to the silence pressing against you. That night, I was sitting at the front desk, a small lamp to my left and a big window right in front of me. The window stretched almost from the desk's surface to the ceiling, giving me a clear view of the front lawn and the faint glow of the security lights outside. The night was cold, and condensation had started forming on the glass, distorting the view a little. I was going through a thick binder full of old maintenance reports, trying to stay awake. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall was the only thing breaking the stillness. My focus drifted in and out as I read the same paragraph over and over. Then, out of nowhere, I got that strange feeling, the kind that crawls up the back of your neck, like someone's eyes are fixed on you. It was a deep, instinctive feeling, something primal that made every muscle tighten without reason. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just the silence or the late hour messing with my head. I turned another page in the binder, forced myself to keep reading, but that feeling grew stronger. It was like the air had changed, heavier somehow. Without even realizing I was doing it, I slowly lifted my eyes toward the window. There was a face pressed against the glass. It was just inches away, eyes locked directly on mine. I froze. The face was pale, dirty, the skin tight and worn, the kind of look that comes from days without sleep or food. The eyes were wide open, unblinking, with a flat, emotionless stare that didn't make sense. His nose and mouth were flattened against the glass, and the fog from his breath had clouded a small circle around his face. My entire body tensed, and I couldn't move for a few seconds. I didn't know how long he had been standing there, watching me while I was reading. The shock hit all at once, a rush of adrenaline that almost made me dizzy. I jumped up so fast my chair fell backward and hit the floor with a loud crack. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my head. I ran out of the office and into the main foyer. The large glass door that led to the front porch was supposed to be locked at all times. I reached it and my stomach dropped. It wasn't locked. The handle was turned just slightly, as if it had been tested. Then the door rattled violently. He was there, shaking it back and forth, the sound echoing through the hall. I could see his shadow through the glass panels, his hands gripping the handle, yanking it again and again. The metal hinges groaned under the force. I stepped back, my hands trembling, unsure what to do next. My phone was in the office. My radio was dead from earlier. My breathing was uneven, short bursts I couldn't control. I sprinted back to the office, grabbed the phone, and dialed emergency. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. I moved to another room, away from the front door, trying to keep as much distance as possible between me and him. As I waited, I could hear his footsteps moving along the porch. Slow, deliberate. He was circling the house. I stayed low, crouched near the window, peeking carefully from behind a curtain. He was walking along the side of the building, scanning the windows. The security lights outside caught his outline, tall, lean, wearing dark clothes that blended into the shadows. He didn't look like someone wandering by accident. His movements were slow, steady, as if he knew where he was going. Then he stopped right in front of the next window and leaned close, pressing his face against the glass again, staring in just like before. My skin crawled. I could see the fog from his breath forming small white circles on the cold glass. He tilted his head slightly, scanning the room like he was trying to see if anyone else was inside. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath, the phone still pressed to my ear as the operator's voice echoed faintly through the speaker. He moved again, this time to the next window, then the next. He was following me. Every room I backed into, his shadow appeared seconds later at the window. The faint reflection of his face would appear in the dark glass, moving from one side of the house to the other. I could hear the crunch of his boots on the gravel, the scraping of his jacket against the siding. Minutes felt like hours. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew it wasn't random. He wasn't trying to talk, wasn't yelling or making threats, just watching, moving slowly around the building, testing every door, every window. I finally saw the flashing red and blue lights coming up the road through one of the front windows, and I've never felt more relieved in my life. As the police cars pulled into the driveway, the man turned away and vanished into the dark. The officers searched the area, moving through the trees and bushes with flashlights. They didn't find him. No footprints close enough to track, no sign of where he came from or where he went. They told me it might have been a drifter or someone on something, maybe just trying random doors. But I knew it wasn't random. He knew exactly where to look, and he wasn't startled by being seen. He moved like someone who had done it before. The rest of the night, I didn't sit down. I stayed near the back exit, lights on in every room, watching the cameras over and over again. He was there for longer than I realized. The footage showed him standing outside the window for nearly 5 minutes before I looked up, just standing there, staring through the glass. The next day, I barely slept. The feeling of his eyes on me stuck in my head, looping over and over again. The way he moved, the way his face looked when I first saw him, it all replayed in my mind like a bad recording. The management installed new locks and added motion lights outside, and the police said they'd patrol the area more often. I tried to convince myself it was over, but the next night it happened again. Around the same time, maybe just after midnight, I was sitting in the same office when I heard a faint noise outside. Something light, like a footstep on the gravel. I froze. My throat tightened instantly. I turned slowly toward the window, and my stomach dropped when I saw a shadow move across the glass. The same shape, the same slow movement. Before I could even reach for my phone, the security lights flicked on, triggered by motion. And there he was, standing at the edge of the lawn, watching the building again. This time, the police caught him before he got close to the house. He tried to run, but one of the patrol cars was already nearby. They found him hiding behind a dumpster near the end of the road. Turns out, he'd been living out of his car for weeks, parked just far enough away to stay unnoticed. He had a long record, trespassing, stalking, breaking, and entering. When they searched his vehicle, they found a crowbar, duct tape, gloves, and a set of printed floor plans for the estate. He hadn't come by accident. He had been watching for a while, probably testing doors on other nights before finally deciding to act. After that night, I couldn't stay there anymore. The building didn't feel safe, no matter how many locks or lights were added. Every time I passed that window, I could almost see his reflection there again, pale and motionless, waiting for me to look up. I transferred to a different job not long after. But every now and then, especially when I'm working late, I still get that same feeling. That slow, creeping sense that someone's eyes are on me, just out of sight, waiting. And I always make myself look, because I learned the hard way that when something feels off in the dark, it usually is. Word count: 1,530.